Welcome to the Fantasy Draft Weekly Rundown. Joining me, as always, is co-host and NFL Ironman London Fletcher. London was an interesting week one, and I'm curious for your take on this since we know you're the defensive guy. Which defensive letdown surprised you more? Carolina in the opener, or how about that Chiefs defense against the Chargers?
They both were disappointing and surprising. I guess if I had to pick one, I would say Kansas City, especially at home, allowing San Diego to score so many points. What did they score, like 26 points or
Yeah,
something like?
exactly. They were in the upper 20s in no time.
Yes, I would say that's very surprising. I thought the Chiefs would be able to use that home field advantage, snap count, things like that. Get after, use that crowd, get after the quarterback. But on the other side, as far as Denver and Carolina is concerned, I was surprised that Denver was able to run the ball as well as they ran the ball against Carolina. That was a really stout run defense against last year. But to allow C.J. Anderson to run wild like he did in that game, I was surprised by that as well.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. I mean, you're leading me straight into the second segment. Do you even need me here as a host?
So
Because
that's what I do, man. I set you up.
exactly, because I got a question for you about C.J. Anderson. The fact that to me he looked like a true running back one in fantasy, and he kind of looked like the focus of their offense. I know it's only 1 week, but I'm going to ask you: are you buying into him as an elite back, or did any other backs impress you more that you want to? Mention. Let's start with Anderson first. Do you think he's a true number one back in fantasy?
I think he is a true number one in fantasy because I look at Denver's offense and you look at that game against Carolina. That the way they play that game is really how I see them playing at least the first half of the season until Trevor Siemian gets more comfortable. They're going to run the ball, play defense, short passes, things like that. But you saw Anderson also being effective in the passing game, which is
Right.
big in the PPR leagues, like a fantasy draft. So I see him as a running back one, RB1, and you see him now. Not that it's truly a Gary Kubiak type of offense. It's not a hybrid between what Peyton Manning ran before and also Kubiak, trying to run out of shotgun. He's lined up behind center. And he's able to get his foot in the ground and get downhill. So I would say he's going to be RB1 because he'll get 20 carries a game and maybe 4 or 5 targets as well.
Yeah, Simeon only throwing in the lower 20s in terms of attempts certainly helps. Real quickly, did any other backs impress you week one that you want to mention?
I would say D'Angelo Williams. D'Angelo Williams. I mean, what he rushed for 143 yards, 2 touchdowns. So that was very impressive. You have a 33-year-old running back being able to do that, and then Melvin Gordon. Sure, he surprised a lot of people scoring 2 touchdowns as well.
Yeah, it's amazing how that works. Guy doesn't score his whole rookie year, all of a sudden
And
scores twice. So that
right,
variance in
exactly. Week
football,
one.
exactly, it's alive and well. Let's get to the picks for this week. Week two, pretty interesting as well. I'm going to start with quarterback Andy Dalton. I was looking at numbers, and I actually found this to jump off the page to me. After 20 plus fantasy points in the opener, Dalton has now eclipsed 20 fantasy points in 10 of his last 14 games. For a guy who doesn't run, that's pretty impressive to me. And you look at those games, and one of those he actually left with injury, and one of those was 18 fantasy points. So he's really around 20 fantasy points every time he steps out there. Cousins threw for 300 plus yards on the Steelers defense last year. A.J. Green looked like a true wide receiver one. So I think it's going to be a fast-paced game, a high over/under. I really like Andy Dalton. Who do you like this week, London?
I like. I'll probably be in the minority here. Maybe not. I like Jameis Winston against the Arizona Cardinals at home. The Cardinals defense I think is living a little bit off of its reputation from a season ago, and they actually probably 2 seasons ago with their ability to get after the quarterback with their different blitzes. But they don't have the type of corners that they had in the past. As you saw what Jimmy Garoppolo was able to do against them guys, man. He threw for, 264 yards. Jameis Winston at home with those weapons, whether it be Mike Evans, Safarian Jenkins, Vincent Jackson, I think Sims out of the backfield. He has a lot of different targets. I like Jameis Winston against the Cardinals. They don't have the corners, I think, to match up with the Bucks personnel.
Yeah, I think you, even if you're not on Winston this week, last week showed what he could be this season. So there will be a lot of weeks moving forward that I think both you and I will like Jameis Winston. That kid just looks like a young stud. I think he's got top five potential if all goes well this year. But let's move on to running back. I'm going to go with a few guys because I really like the cheap backs this week. I know everyone's going to be on the top priced receivers, so in order to fit them, you got to go guys like Jeremy Langford, who's my favorite overall running back play of the week. I mean, you look at that Eagles defense, and what I was a little worried about is that without Chip Kelly, we weren't sure that they were going to be so susceptible against the run because they were on the field more than any defense last year because of their quick offense, which you thought might have led to their susceptibility. But again, Isaiah Crowell and Duke Johnson both over 5 yards a carry last week. Jeremy Langford won't have to split. So all the carries are his, all the catches are his, all the goal line work's his, and he's only 9,100 on fantasy drafts, so that's a no-brainer to me. And a stat that I think will shock you, it shocked me, is that Danny Woodhead finished as the fourth scoring running back last year because he catches so many passes. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, he caught 80 passes last year, the same amount as Allen Robinson and Eric Decker, which is interesting. And because of all the passes, he's just that good in this format. He's only priced at 10,200. Last week, you mentioned Melvin Gordon. Woodhead played 50 snaps to his 23. He touched the ball 21 to Gordon's 14. He averaged 5.6 yards a carry to Gordon's 4.1, and he was the only one to catch a pass. So while Gordon looked good in the opener and people might worry about that split, the numbers kind of show that Woodhead was the guy. And remember, the last time Woodhead was with Wisenhunt, he caught 76 passes and rushed for a career high 103 attempts. The 16 rushes last week were a career high, so I think it's all clear skies ahead for Danny Woodhead. Who do you like this week?
I'm gonna give you one back that I really like. You talk about going on the low end side. I'm not gonna go as low as you went, but I like DeMarco Murray. He's not gonna cost you, on the upper end like D'Angelo Williams and some of the other high priced running backs, but he's only gonna cost you 10-7 on fantasy draft. And you look at what Murray was able to do. He caught five passes last week and 2 touchdowns, had 13 carries. I think his carries will increase. I think his yards will go up as well. So I like DeMarco Murray, especially if you're going to go higher in at the quarterback position or wide receiver position or some other position, and you want to try to fit a running back in your lineup that's not going to cost you high dollars. So I like Murray.
There you go. I apologize from here on out because I'm pretty much going to be Captain Obvious the rest of the way, but I want to let the viewers know who I think are going to be the heavily owned guys in cash games. So the ones that, if you don't use them, you're risking them having a big day and you having to play from behind. One of those guys is Odell Beckham, who I kind of talked about last week. He was shadowed again, but there's nothing the Saints defense can do this week to contain him. Delvin Breaux was pretty much the only guy you worry about. He broke his leg last week. And even with him last year, Beckham went for 3 touchdowns against this defense. If you remember, that was the game Manning threw for 350 yards and 6 touchdowns. While it was in the Superdome, and I don't think you can expect that from him, I think it is going to be a shootout again. The weather is the only thing that I'm looking at. It looks like it might be rainy, but still, we know Beckham can catch the ball in pretty much any condition. I'm not worried about him. I love Odell Beckham as my wide receiver 1 this week. London, who do you like?
A wide receiver that I like is Kelvin Benjamin. And you looked at him in the first ball game against the Denver Broncos after having missed the season with a ACL injury. Led them in receptions, 9 balls, caught a touchdown pass. I think he's going to be even better this week with 10 days off going against the San Francisco 49ers defense. Even though the 49ers blanked the Rams at home 28-zip, I'm not convinced that this is a top-flight defense that the 49ers have. The Rams never challenged them at all. I think with Kelvin Benjamin, you saw him being able to get the best of the number 1 ranked pass defense a season ago in the Denver Broncos. So I know he has to really like his matchup against the San Francisco 49ers, and Cam Newton loves him. He's his number 1 target.
Yeah, it was interesting last week. The beat writer said he was only supposed to be limited to 35 snaps. He almost played that in the first half, finished with over 50. So any concerns you had about Kelvin Benjamin should probably be down the toilet at this point. That was a pretty impressive opener. Let's move on to tight end. And this guy, honestly, is my lock of the week overall. I think you can play this guy in cash games. I think you can play him in tournaments. Delaney Walker is a guy who was kind of overlooked a little bit last week by Mariota, but this matchup sets up perfectly for him. The Lions allowed the most passing touchdowns to opposing tight ends last year. Delaney Walker, 90 receptions last year, led the position. And, I mean, the only matchup you really have to worry about here is Tajay Sharp and possibly Darius Slay. Other than that, it looks like it's going to be a game where Mariota's passing because this Lions team looks like they're made for shootouts with a bad defense. So after a quiet week one, I really expect them to be a little bit underowned in a plus matchup. And, they ranked fourth in fantasy points allowed. I think this is a game where Delaney Walker goes back to 2015 Delaney Walker, and he's pretty cheap. Who do you like at tight end position?
Well, since I spent down on the running back position, I'm going to spend up at the tight end position. I'm going Jordan Reed. I think he's the second most expensive tight end on fantasy draft. Actually, he's the most expensive because Gronkowski, we don't know if he's going to play.
Right.
Doesn't seem like it this weekend. He didn't practice yesterday. So when I look at the Jordan Reed matchup against the Dallas Cowboys, I look at the eyes, man. You can throw out all those stats about who gives up the most points against tight ends and all that. My eyes tell me the Dallas Cowboys don't have a guy who can cover him, whether it be a linebacker or safety. They don't even have a cornerback that can cover this guy. He is unguardable. Kirk Cousins missed him on a couple opportunities that he had against the Pittsburgh Steelers that could have made the outcome of that ball game totally different. I expect Kirk to play better after all the stuff he's faced this week. So with that being said, Jordan Reed is his guy. He loves to get the ball to, especially in the red zone. I wouldn't be surprised if Jordan Reed came out of this ball game with 2 touchdown receptions.
2 touchdowns. You heard it there. I mean, I'm the biggest Jordan Reed fan on the planet. I won't go a week this whole season without having at least a little shares of him because he's really like the Antonio Brown of the position right now, especially without Gronkowski. So I have to agree with you. The matchup isn't completely ideal, but this guy gets it done against anyone. He was targeted 4 times on that first drive, ended with 11. Let's go to defense. This one's a no-brainer for me. Usually, I like to spend down at defense, but this week I think you got to leave some salary. Here's my question for you: are the Rams still going with Case Keenum? If so, use the defense against them. We saw them last week. The Seahawks play them this week, so it's a pretty damn good defense. That is a no-brainer. I want, even at 7,400, I'll take a hit elsewhere to roster this defense. I think they're in that good of a position. Who do you like this week?
I like a defense that's not going to cost you as much, but I think will be as dominant. The New England Patriots against the Miami Dolphins. You look at the Dolphins; they faced that Seattle Seahawks defense that you're talking about is going to go against the Rams and Case Keenum. They held the Miami Dolphins to 10 points. I'm sorry. You look at the New England Patriots. They looked at you look at what they're able to do. The Seattle Seahawks held the Miami Dolphins to 10 points. New England's just as good defensively, if not better. They'll be playing at home. I think it'll be a situation where the Patriots are going to get up on the Dolphins and force them really to do something they're not comfortable with, which is throw the football, and that's going to be right up the Patriots' alley. I expect them to get a couple turnovers. They always seem to do that, create turnovers, especially at home. So, you look at what they were able to do going to Arizona against a much more potent offense and shut them down. I don't think the Dolphins' offense will be able to move the ball against the Patriots.
There you go. You're making me think now because I do hate spending up at defense if I could save a little. You're making me rethink my lineup. But let's get to the
question. What I'm here for.
Exactly. Let's get to the questions. We got some good ones this week. And let's start with one gorilla related. This is our first gorilla related question, I think. So you heard about Harambe, the gorilla who was shot down a few months ago.
Right.
Supposedly, a Chinese zoo put up on their website a vote on their new gorilla's name, and Harambe McHarambe Face was chosen. But that story later was proved to be a hoax. It was just someone trying to get clicks. But so this leads me to this question. If you could name a pet gorilla, what would you name it? And this one comes from Cleveland God on Twitter.
Wow. I don't know that I would want a gorilla as a pet. First and foremost, that would be first thing I would look at. But man, Rambo.
Well, there you go.
Rambo. Why not?
You would be surprised. I was watching a thing a few weeks ago on some people out in the Middle East who have lions and jaguars and things as pets. So people will legitimately keep anything. It's interesting. Yeah. Let's move on. Our second question, I think this is a very good question. This is why I added it in late. What do you think of this matchup between Jason Verrett and Allen Robinson? Verrett's only 5'10", but he graded as the top cornerback according to Pro Football Focus last year. In that matchup, Robinson caught 5 for 50-plus and a touchdown against him last year. So I think most of us are wondering, he was targeted 15 times. He got it done last year. Do we like the taller receiver against the smaller corner, or do we just avoid these corners who are pretty dominant?
Well, it depends on who the receiver is and who the cornerback is. In this matchup, I'm still going to go with Robinson. I mean, you talk about a guy 6'3", and Verrett is an excellent corner, especially. I think he's a bit overrated. I mean, I'm sorry, overlooked because he's out in San Diego, and they don't get nearly as much attention as some of the other teams, and he doesn't get as much attention as some of the other cornerbacks. But him being an elite cornerback, I still would have to go with Robinson because of his physical nature, his stature, and the skill set. I mean, the guy just knows how to go up, high point the ball, make acrobatic catches, even in tight coverage. Bortles loves throwing the football to him. So, and I still would I still might go with Robinson in this matchup.
Yeah, and I know you liked A.J. Green last week, so you are the one to consult when it comes to these big receivers against the corners. The final question, of course, the viewers got to hate on me a little bit. They ask, what would Ricky score on the Wonderlic test? Now, I looked it up. It looks like 50 is a perfect score and 20 is average intelligence. So what do you think I would score on a Wonderlic?
Well, we know you're not going to score 50. That's not going to happen. 20 is average, so average intelligence. You're not average. You're below average. I would think you would be probably score about a 15.
15.
I would say yes, 15, max 17.
Honestly, it's higher than I thought you were going to go for me, so I'm going to consider this one a victory, and we will end on that. Until next time, I'm Ricky Sanders with London Fletcher, and we're out.